Everyone, I invite you to take your Bibles and join me in Malachi. It's been our great joy for these several weeks now to be looking at the last of the Old Testament prophets. Malachi is going to deliver this message from our God to his people. And then there are going to be 400 years of silence. The people of God will hear nothing again until they hear the voice of John the Baptist crying in the wilderness and giving the great admonition that we are to make straight our paths and prepare ourselves, for the King is coming. And so it's really a marvelous book to look at before we head into the Christmas season now, the Christmas week. It certainly has a lot of implications for the birth of Christ and why that was necessary. And we've been seeing how this is divided into 6 oracles. Oracle comes from the actual Hebrew word burden, and it's unclear whether it's a burden for the one who must deliver the message or a burden for the hearer or a burden for both. But he has come to give a dire warning that things are not right, that things are broken, and we need to get ready to put them right. And so we find ourselves in Oracle 4, beginning in chapter 2, verse 17. And I want to read that one, and then we're going to review Oracles 1, 2, and 3. Just to remind ourselves of where we are in this progression. And then we're going to look deeply at the 4th oracle. And like the other oracles, you will recognize it begins with this accusation. And the people give a plea that they are not guilty, that they have been falsely accused by God. And listen to what he says, chapter 2, verse 17. Malachi, delivering the word of the Lord, says, "You have wearied the Lord with your words. Yet you say, how have we wearied him? In that you say, everyone who does evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delights in them. Or, where is the God of justice?" Chapter 3, verse 1. This is one of those places in the Old Testament where this is a really unfortunate chapter break. Just a bad place for it. Because this is all part of the same oracle. "Behold, I am going to send my messenger, and he will clear the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. And the messenger of the covenant, in whom you delight, behold, he is coming, says the Lord of hosts. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap. And he will sit as a smelter and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver, so that they may present to the Lord offerings in righteousness. Then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to the Lord, as in the days of old, and as in former years. Then I will draw near to you for judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, and against the adulterers, and against those who swear falsely, and against those who oppress the wage earner in his wages, the widow and the orphan, and those who turn aside the alien and do not fear me, says the Lord of hosts. For I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore you, O sons of Jacob, are not consumed." Well, we've been paying careful attention to the fact that there is a serious problem in the time of Malachi. And that problem is really epitomized by chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. We've read these every Sunday that we've looked at this, and I'm going to read them to you again. There is a severe problem, and it's with the people of God and with their hearts and with their lack of commitment and their they've become lethargic and no longer care about the things of God. And listen to what they have said. Malachi says to them, "You have said it is vain to serve God." So what are they saying? There's no It's worthless for us to serve you, God. For what profit, it says, is it that we have kept his charge and that we have walked in mourning before the Lord of hosts? And then they add injury to insult in verse 15 where they say, now we call the arrogant blessed. In other words, evildoers seem to be blessed by you, God. Not only are the doers of wickedness built up, but they also test God and escape. They said there's really nothing in this for us. We have served you. And what has that gotten us? The Persians have invaded. They have crushed and destroyed the temple. They have taken away the likes of Daniel and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What do we have to show for all of our commitment to you? And those who are evil, like the Persians, seem to prosper. And you do nothing about it, God. So we would kind of like out of this contract now. We'd like out of our contract with you. We would like out of this covenant with you. And we will go another way. And to make matters even worse, they are firmly convinced that they are supposed to be the heirs to the next world superpower. To make matters even worse, for the first time, the Persians have finally hit a force that they cannot defeat. And that would be the Athenians. And they're 0-3 against the Athenians. And now it's Athens that is emerging onto the world stage as the world's power. And they worship pagan gods. And they prosper. These people have become lethargic. There's no sense of urgency. They don't care. They are saying to God, we will do the bare minimum it takes to go through some sort of religious observances, but we really don't love you anymore. And we really don't care about you anymore. And quite frankly, we think we'd be better off if we were just Athenians. How did they get here? When you look around your society and the glue that's supposed to hold your society is gone. When you look around your society and all the institutions you thought were going to remain forever are laying in heaps of rubble on the ground. How did it come to this? And what do you do? Well, we've seen in the first 3 oracles how they came to this point. And it's a very logical, sad descent. But it is also a roadmap to the way back. It is a roadmap to the way back to God. Back to peace with God. So number 1, in Oracle 1, how did they get here? They have no love for God. First thing, how did they get here? No love. What were they told to do? They were told to remember that God loves them. Remember back in Oracle chapter 1, verse 2, God says, I have loved you, says the Lord, but you say, how have you loved us? We're not really feeling your love right now. And then he tells them down in verse 5, he says, and your eyes will see this. You will see that I love you. And then you will magnify my name, and people will see it beyond the borders of Israel, and they will magnify my name. Oracle 2, they have no fear. They have no sense of awe of God. There's no reverence for God. They bring sacrifices that are blind and maim and lame. When it's time for the sacrifices, they go out and look at their herds. They see a goat that's near death and say, yeah, we'll take that one to the temple and we'll sacrifice him because that's really no cost to us because he was about to die anyway. And God says, you have defiled me. You have no fear of me. Of course they don't have any fear. If you don't love someone, then you probably, the next step down is you don't respect them. And so Oracle 2, we're told to stop disgracing worship. In fact, he says, you know what? It would be better off if you had just shut the temple down and stopped coming with these sacrifices. You're just kindling my anger towards you. You'd be better off if you just stopped. And then Oracle 3, if you don't love and you don't honor, you know what the next step is? There's no reason to be faithful. Why would you be faithful to someone you don't love and who you don't see any respect for them? And God said, you don't have any respect. In Oracle 3, he says, there's no faithfulness. You have no respect for the covenant between Israel and God. And he said, the way I know that you have no covenantal respect for me is that you don't have any covenantal respect for each other. And where was that seen most prevalently? In their marriages. And their willingness to divorce the wives of their youth and take on foreign wives. It says, be true. Be true to the marriage covenant, and I will know that you are returning. Remember, the marriage covenant is like the canary in the coal mine. When the marriages are going bad, you know everything else is way past gone. Way past gone. So what is the next step? If you don't love God, there's number one, and you don't respect God, there's no fear, there's no sense of reverence or awe, there's no childlike awe when you think about God and all He's done, then of course you're not faithful to Him anymore. So what we see in the fourth oracle, what is the next step in this descent into the abyss? Well, of course you just need to blame God for all this. Blame God for all this. Yeah, we don't love you, and we don't fear you, and we are not faithful to you, and that's all your fault, God. It's quite remarkable how deep into the abyss they have fallen. Listen to what they say at the end of verse 17 of chapter 2. They look at God and they say, where is your justice? Put it another way, what they're really asking is they're saying, if you're so great and you're so just, why are we under the boot of the Persians? Why is the next world superpower arising and it's just another bunch of pagans? By the way, that'll be followed by another group of pagans, the Greeks to the Macedonians to the Romans. And by the time you arrive 400 years later when Jesus is born, it's like nothing has changed. It's like it's a second in time. And they're still in the same place saying, Lord, if you are just and you are a good God, why are these bad things happening to us? Now, I just want to say there are some really, really righteous men in the Bible who asked that question. I mean, good men who loved God, and they feared God. And when they asked Him, why does evil prosper? They were asking from a place where they just wanted to understand. These people don't want to understand. They want to accuse God. They are looking God right in the eye and saying, we don't have to love you, and we don't have to fear you, and we don't have to be faithful to you because you are not good. You're not good. Just want to show you some of the men in the Bible who asked this same question, where is your justice? But they asked it from a place of reverence. They asked it from a place of fear of God. And with such a man as Job, if you want to join me, I'm just going to read from Job chapter 21, verse 7. Job asked this question. Job, of whom God said to Satan, there's none righteous, there's no one like him. Job is, how do we know that Job is a righteous man? Because God tells us he is a righteous man. And he has suffered mightily. He has lost his family. He has lost his wealth. He has lost his health. And he's looking around him, and then he asks this question, Job chapter 21, verse 7. Why do the wicked still live? Continue on. Also become very powerful. It's not a foolish question, is it? Anyone who looks at the world can tell things are severely broken. It appears that the unrighteous are successful at every turn. It appears that they prosper at every turn. The psalmist in Psalm 73 asked this same question. Psalm 73, verses 1, 2, and 3, he says, surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. He said, I almost doubted you, God. I almost doubted. Why? Why did he almost doubt? My steps had almost slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. He said, that almost caused me to question you. And at the front end of the Persian invasion, when the people are told that the Persians are coming, in the book of Habakkuk asked the question, he says, Lord, how could you use someone so evil to punish us? And he says, I realize we're not great, but we're not as bad as them. Habakkuk says this to God. He says, thine eyes are too pure to approve evil, and thou canst not look on wickedness with favor. Why dost thou look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why are you sending, of all people, the Babylonians to punish us? Well, by the time of Malachi, the Babylonians have come. They've done the deed. They've destroyed Jerusalem. They have taken away the prisoners. And the people are no longer asking the question from a heart that loves God and trusts God and fears God. They are asking the question because they don't love God anymore. And they just want to rationalize their own sin. Quite frankly, that question gets asked all the time today, doesn't it? After a terrible catastrophe like when a typhoon or a tsunami hits a small fishing village and so many are killed, unbelievers look at you and me and they say, if your God is so great and he is so wonderful and he is so just, where was he when that tsunami was coming on shore? Eli Wiesel, a survivor of the Holocaust. He survived the Holocaust as a teenager. He's written many things, but he's a big proponent of writing The Trial of God. And The Trial of God is really a book which takes God and puts him on trial for not saving them from the evil of the Nazis. He says, I believe you're there. He said, I'm just accusing you of being ambivalent, that you don't care. I know you're there, but it looks like you don't care. These people of Malachi, they're just using this as an excuse to justify the fact that they are no longer going to love God, they are no longer going to fear God, and quite frankly, they are no longer going to be faithful to him. And they just want him to know it's all his fault. You did it. You did this. Our love has grown cold. We no longer fear you. We no longer have any sense of awe in you. We are certainly not going to be faithful to you. And quite frankly, we are justified in doing it because you are no good. You're just not good. It's almost like the covenant between Abraham and Israel and God. God and Israel had a morals clause. And God, you violated it. You're just not very good at this God thing. And we're leaving the covenant because of it. We just want out. If you were any good at this, the Persians would not be crushing us. And quite frankly, you don't even keep your promises, because 100 years ago, we saw what Zechariah wrote. Zechariah said all the nations of the world are coming to Israel, and they're going to come to Jerusalem, and they're going to lay piles of silver and gold at the feet of the Messiah. And that's not happening. You don't even keep your promises. You're just hot air. This is quite a bad place to be, isn't it? When you just shake your fist in God's face and you dare him to do something about it. This is the I dare you moment. I dare you. Well, this is obviously a false accusation that they have leveled at God. His response comes in chapter 3, verse 6. Look at chapter 3, verse 6. He declares to them, for I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore, you, O sons of Jacob, are not consumed. He just wants them to know flat up. He said, I'm not the one who's changed. I'm exactly the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm the same God of Moses. I'm the same God of Joshua. I'm the same God of Solomon and David's. You have changed. And now, if it weren't for my faithfulness, you would have been consumed a long time ago. Why is the demand for God's immediate justice foolish? They're demanding his immediate justice. They want to see him smite the Persians. They want to see him crush them. No mercy. Just crush them. That's exactly what they wanted in Jesus' day, right? When he comes in on Palm Sunday and they are all singing his praises, you know what they expect? They fully expect he's going to take up a sword and he is just going to crush the Romans without mercy. They are making a demand for immediate, swift, unmerciful justice. And then we'll follow you, God. Then we'll know you're true. Why is that such a foolish thing to demand? Because nobody can withstand that standard. You know what the irony of all this is? He says, listen, if I applied to your lives the standard you are demanding of justice that I apply to these people, you would not be standing here. You would have been gone a long time ago. A long time ago. That's the sad irony of this request, is they look at God and say, you're not just because you're not judging our enemies. The irony of that is, if he had applied that standard to them, they may not have survived Exodus chapter 32. Imagine how much shorter your Bible would be. Exodus chapter 32, if you want to turn there. Yeah, my version right here, I know it's different because, type. This would be the Old Testament right there. That would be the Old Testament. I don't think they would have survived this moment. Go to Exodus chapter 32. This is a terrible moment of rebellion. Just awful. The people had been brought out of Egypt by the strong arm of God, very powerful arm of God, and they're not particularly thankful for that. They are not particularly humble. And look what happens in Exodus chapter 32, verses 2 through 4. And Aaron, that's Moses' brother, said to them, tear off the gold rings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. Then all the people tore off the gold rings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a molten calf. And they said, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. So let's apply their standard to this. They want immediate, swift, unmerciful justice upon pagan worshipers. And quite frankly, they almost got it. Go to verse 7. Then the Lord said to Moses, go down at once, for your people whom you brought up from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. Boy, that's an understatement, isn't it? Quickly. They have quickly turned aside. They have just watched Egypt be crushed by the power of God. They have walked through the Red Sea on dry land. And they're still demanding more from God. You're just not just. You're not giving us what we want. We don't want to be in the desert. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made for themselves a molten calf and have worshipped it and have sacrificed to it and said, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, they are an obstinate people. Now then, let me alone, that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them, and I will make of you a great nation. Of course, Moses prays on behalf of the people. He prays. And he asks them. He asks them to turn from his anger. And of course God does, because he must be true to his covenantal promise. Listen, the next time you're watching the news and you see some social figure or celebrity or political figure doing what you know is unrighteousness, and you're filled with righteous anger, and you just want to see this person crushed, just pause and remind yourself that if God applied that standard to my life, I would not be standing here to watch this. I'd be gone. What is so insane, just insane about the people of Malachi? They are asking for God to apply a standard of mercilessness that would have caused them to be destroyed a long, long time ago. They are proposing a standard that no one can meet. They do not understand the nature of the covenant that God made with them. I want to remind you, I think some of you will know this, but when God makes that covenant with Abraham and promises to make him a great nation, we read that last week in Genesis chapter 12, to seal the deal, God does what was a very common practice in the Near East. They took some animals and they killed them and they cut them in half and they separated them. And the people entering into the contract, this would be like you and me signing a contract today. The people entering into the covenant together would walk between the sacrifices and then have a meal together. But if you go back in Genesis chapter 12 and 15 and read that carefully, the only one who walks between the pieces of the sacrifice is God. God is making a promise to God. He is the only signatory on this. That's why in Lamentations it says that His mercy is renewed towards us daily. Great is His faithfulness. Faithfulness to what? What is God being faithful to? The promise that He made. He's not like us. We break promises all the time. But they are being true. Listen, Isaiah warned them. Let me see. Let me remind myself where I want to. Yeah, Isaiah chapter 5, verse 18. Isaiah kind of warned them, you need to be careful when you ask God to come and do justice. You need to be careful about that. Because that might not end the way you think it's going to end. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 18. Isaiah is saying the next time you're crying out for justice, better do it the way Job did it. You better do it the way the writer of Psalm 73 did it, with a lot of humility and a lot of fear of God. I mean, right out fear of Him. Listen to what Isaiah says. It's really quite sobering. Chapter 5, verse 18, woe to those who drag iniquity with the cords of falsehood and sin as if with cart ropes, who say, let Him, God, make speed. Let Him hasten His work that we may see it. And let the purposes of the Holy One of Israel draw near and come to pass that we may know it. Why would He say woe to those people? Because when God comes rushing in with His final fist of justice, they may not fare very well. Verse 20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Isn't that exactly what we just read in Malachi? That's exactly what we just read in Malachi chapter 2, verse 17. You're calling evil good and good evil, and you're blaming me, God. You're blaming God for the fact that evil is going untested, and you're saying, let Him come and prove to us that He's just. And Isaiah is saying, you better be careful when you ask for that. You might want to take a deep breath, because that may not go exactly how you think it's going to go. So they are demanding for God's immediate justice, and quite frankly, that is quite foolish. It's quite foolish. So let's go back to Malachi chapter 3 and see how this is going to end. So God's going to give them a response. They've accused God of being unjust because evil people are prospering. So God is going to answer that accusation. And I want to look at what are the consequences of God's unchanging character. And this is kind of a good news, bad news. The good news is justice is coming. The bad news is justice is coming. What is the consequence of God's unchanging character? What is the consequence of Malachi chapter 3, verse 6, that God does not change? The consequence of that is justice is coming, as surely as we are all in this room. So how's it going to come? Well, first of all, let's just look at who's bringing it. Chapter 3, verse 1. Behold, I am going to send my messenger. So God is sending a messenger, or will be sending a messenger, who will clear the way before me. Then there's another messenger who's coming. And the Lord, so this is a second messenger, whom you seek, will suddenly come to His temple, and the messenger of the covenant He is called. What an interesting name. Do you know that's not used anywhere else in the Bible? Only here is the Lord referred to as the messenger of the covenant. Why? Because they want out of this covenant. He said, this covenant you want out of, this covenant you're unfaithful to, the covenant you'd like a divorce, you'd like to divorce me, God says. And He said, that covenant you want out, well, the messenger of that covenant that you think is so horrible and so awful, He is coming. Who's bringing it? My messenger and the messenger of the covenant. So an appointed ambassador. someone handpicked. It's best to understand and be aware that justice stands at the ready. And you are foolish to think that God is blind to the injustice. So where is he coming? Second question, where is it going to happen? Well, as it turns out, it's going to happen in the temple. In the temple is where the messenger is coming. By the way, that fits perfectly with Malachi. Go back to Malachi chapter 1, verses 7 and 8. They are disgracing and defiling the temple. Malachi 1, chapter 1, verse 7, you are presenting defiled food upon my altar, but you say, how have we defiled thee? In other words, they denied it. They denied it. How are we doing this? In that you say, the table of the Lord is to be despised, but when you present the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you present the lame and the sick, is it not evil? Why not offer it to your governor? Would he be pleased with you? Or would he receive you kindly, says the Lord of hosts? In other words, if you took this and tried to pay your taxes with this goat, would your Persian governor even take this? The answer is, of course, he would not. So it does make sense that he's coming to the temple. He's coming to the temple, and it's going to start there. It's going to start there. Who will be the target of this? Who's going to be the target when he arrives at the temple? Well, verse 2, chapter 3, verse 2. But who can endure the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appears? You know who the king is coming to judge? Everyone. It's going to be a comprehensive judgment. No one can escape scrutiny. In the court of God, there are no unsolved crimes. There are no cases that get closed because there are no suspects. This past week, the mastermind of the downing of Pan Am Flight 103 above Lockerbie, Scotland, was arrested in Libya and turned over to U.S. officials. Some of you in this room are old enough to remember that. But you're going to have to really put on your memory cap, aren't you? That was 1988. For 34 years, Abu Agela Muhammad Masood Khair al-Marimi thought he was in the clear. He thought he was in the clear. 34 years later, he is sitting in a U.S. prison. Listen. Nobody is going to escape. And listen, I know there are cases that go unsolved. For every case like this, there are cases that will never be solved. I'm here to tell you, none of them are going to get away with it. None of them. You cannot outrun God's justice. Numbers chapter 32, verse 23 says, your sin will find you out. These people are doubting God's justice. They should be fearing God's justice. They don't need to doubt God's justice. They need to fear the absolute certainty of it. No one can endure and no one can stand. It has a comprehensive reach. Everyone is within God's jurisdiction and no one gets away. So that's good news and bad news. He said, yeah, you want justice? I have really, really good news for you. It's coming. But it's not what you think. It may not be the cause for celebration that you were expecting. Who's bringing it? God's appointed messenger. Where's it going to happen? It's going to start in the temple. Who's going to be the target of this justice? Every single person. How will it be accomplished? By absolute purification. Wow. Listen to what's happening. Verse 2, back in chapter 3, verse 2. For he, this messenger, the Lord's messenger, the messenger of the covenant, is like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap. And he will sit as a smelter and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver. Yeah, this is going to be a complete, total purification process. The ones who survive this are going to be completely purified. If you're not familiar with Fuller soap, and I don't know what your translation may say, New American Standard I have says Fuller soap. Fuller soap was a special soap used to clean white linens. And of course, you know, if you have something white, there's a reason carpet isn't white. Because literally every spot shows on it, right? You put on something white, you know it's going to pick up everything. And so Fuller soap was a very special kind of soap used just to clean white linens. Okay, so it has to be powerful. And this purification process, the reason silver is mentioned before even gold is because in Malachi's day, silver was worth a lot more than gold. It's hard for us to imagine that that's the case, but in their time, silver was of much greater value. And the process was a pretty simple one. They would heat up the silver until it started to release about the equivalent of 20 times its mass in oxygen. So it's really removing the oxygen. And then before the oxygen, and if it starts to cool, it reabsorbs all the oxygen. So before it cools, you cover it with what was probably some type of carbon base, probably charcoal in their days, to give it that sheen, that shine, and keep the oxygen from returning. And you knew if the smelter had done a really, really good job because you could see your reflection in the silver. The refiner's fire, God is going to refine this and purify it until he sees his own reflection in his people. It's really a quite beautiful image, isn't it? Yeah, how's this going to be accomplished? Complete purification. Complete purification. So for what reason? For what purpose is God doing this? Well, it tells us. Right at the end of verse 3, we're told exactly why God's doing this. So that they may present to the Lord offerings in righteousness. Then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to the Lord, as in the days of old, as in former years. And then just to repeat that he sees everything that's happening and he's going to judge it, he starts to list some of their sins in verse 5. And I don't think he lists any of the sins of the Persians. I think he's kind of talking to them. Then I will draw near to you for judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers and against the adulterers and against those who swear falsely and against those who oppress the wage earner and his wages, the widow and the orphan, and those who turn aside the alien and do not fear me, says the Lord of hosts. He said, yeah, I'm going to make it so that you can go back into the temple. Remember in that oracle where he told them you'd be better off just locking the doors of the temple? He said, I'm going to make it so that we can unlock the doors. You can go forth. You can present your sacrifice, and it will be pleasing to God. And it will be good. And you will be my people. Well, with Christmas coming just next Sunday, might be good to, before we close, just to reflect on how things really haven't changed all that much 400 years later. 400 years later, things are about the same, sadly. Go with me to the book of John. Turns out God is still looking for true worshipers. John chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. Just as in Malachi's day, which was 4 centuries before this, he could not find anyone who would worship him in a way that is honoring and loving. In John chapter 4, we find him at the well with this Samaritan woman who was deeply involved in sin. And he has revealed to her that he is the Messiah. And he tells her what his purpose is. And he tells her what he is seeking. John chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. But an hour is coming, Jesus says, and now is when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and truth. Doesn't it sound like we just read in Malachi? Malachi is calling them to come be true worshipers. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. They're certainly not doing that in Malachi's day, and sadly they're not doing it in Jesus' day. That is why in John chapter 2, beginning at verse 13, Jesus does this. Boy, this sounds like a purifier of the temple. Where's the messenger coming? The messenger of the covenant? He says he's going to appear suddenly, and he's going to appear in the temple. And it doesn't go well. John chapter 2, verse 13. And the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers seated. By the way, they are defiling the temple just like they did in Malachi's day. People are coming up, and what they would do, they bring their sheep, and they would examine it and say, well, there's a slight blemish here, but you're in luck. We have a sale today on unblemished sheep, and we can make some money off of you. So this is just as defiling. It's just as disgusting. Verse 15, and he, that's Christ, made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he said to those who were selling the doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise. We have gone 400 years and nothing has changed. However, praise God from whom all blessings flow. One big thing has changed. And it is marvelous. And I hope this week of Christmas, you will remind yourself of this over and over and over again. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus is talking about John the Baptist. And he asks his disciples, why did you go out? Matthew chapter 11, verse 7. At the end of that verse, Jesus asked his disciples, why did you go out into the wilderness what did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? I mean, did you go to just hear some guy who's just making stuff up? But what did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft clothing? That would be really nice clothing, good clothing. Behold, those who wear soft clothing are kings and palaces. But why did you go out? To see a prophet? Yes, I say to you, and one who is more than a prophet. Here it comes. This is the one about whom it is written. And Jesus quotes from Malachi chapter 3. He quotes Malachi chapter 3. Behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. John the Baptist is the messenger of Malachi chapter 3. He is the voice. And Jesus is the messenger of the covenant. So as we come to our Christmas observances, it is good to remind ourselves that we are the beneficiaries of a great, great, merciful God who has all authority in heaven and earth, who says to us, be holy as I am holy, who put his Spirit within us and wants to be able to see his reflection in us. It may be that we're not guilty of the exact same things of the people of Malachi's day, but we could have the same spirit, the same attitude, where we become lethargic. We don't really love. And so if we want revival, we have to remind ourselves that God loves us and we love him. We have to fear him and respect him and honor him. We have to be faithful to him. And we have to know that he is just. So what a dichotomy. What a paradox. That this great, great messenger of the covenant, who is born to reign and rule, must first make a way for you and I to enter his kingdom. And that's exactly what he is going to do. As the messenger says, make straight your paths. So let's pray to that end as we head into this Christmas week. Next Sunday on Christmas Day, we will meet for a special communion service here at 10 a.m. A little bit shorter than our normal time together. We'll be here for about an hour. And we will enjoy communion together, and we will think deeply about this baby who was born to die, who has come to purify and to make right, and most importantly, to create worshipers who can worship him in spirit and truth. And we're going to celebrate that for Christmas.